Well, I've got about five after, and so I will continue to watch the monitor and see who is joining us today. But Bud, welcome. We're glad you're here. And Rachel, I see you lingering down there somewhere at the bottom of
Yes, I
my
am.
screen there. So hope you're doing well. And I think, and Andrea is with us. And of course, Frank Dimmock, our mission chat guest, is with us. And I'm in just a moment, I'm going to turn things over to Frank, but I want to thank you all for being here. And like I said, folks may continue to drop in over the next few minutes, and we'll watch. I'll watch for that and admit them if that's the case. But a lot of so you met Frank in person last. It's been a year.
Almost
Our last
exactly.
missions conference, which is Frank was telling me was about the last thing he did.
That's right.
Before COVID hit. He was our guest, and Frank is the Africa Partnership Liaison with the Outreach Foundation since 2017, but had a has had a long involvement in Presbyterian mission in Africa that predates that. So it's great to have Frank with us to bring us up to speed on the Africa mission. On the Outreach Foundation, because that's really how we partner in the Africa mission, is through the work of the Outreach Foundation and through Frank. So Frank, we're glad that you're here tonight. Thanks for doing that and being with us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and hopefully between you and me, we will share the screen in such a way that everything works.
Okay.
We'll give it a shot anyway.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it's great to be with you all again. As Mike mentioned, just about exactly a year ago, I was with you in person, and that was my last opportunity in person to visit and do a church presentation. Since that time, I've not been able to travel back to Africa. Regretfully, that's been a real constraint due to COVID, thanks. But I have been able to communicate via WhatsApp and Skype and email with our partners that we work with in Africa. And so I've been able to get some updates from time to time on how things are going. But I do look forward to being able to travel again, as most of us do, hopefully in a few months' time. As Mike mentioned, my name is Frank Dimmock, and I have a family, and we live in Decatur, Georgia, in missionary housing during this time. We were missionaries, mission co-workers in Africa with the PCUSA for about 33 years. And then I joined World Mission in Louisville and worked with them for another 4 years, and have been with the Outreach Foundation since 2017. So Outreach Foundation, I had known of them and had worked with them alongside them, and they were looking for someone to work with their African partners. So that seemed to be a good fit for me, and I've been thrilled to be a part of that. And I know that First Pres Fayetteville has had a longstanding relationship with the Outreach Foundation in Zambia with House of Moses and Bill and Betty Bryant home, and some other work in Africa. And I'm pleased that you all are interested and engaged in mission work. And I was also impressed when I was there last year to learn about your local mission efforts too, just across your parking lot, as I recall. So I don't know if you were present last year when I was there, but I do have a short video and then some other slides that I can share, and would be happy to answer questions after that. But the short video may be somewhat familiar, because a lot of those pictures are ones that I may have shared last year and stories from that, but we'll see if we can do that. Let's see. Are you seeing something there?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Frank, are you playing something?
Yeah, can you not hear it?
No.
No, no.
Oh, sorry. Well, let's see. Let me just say that, okay, let me just, let me go back, and this is just an introductory slide, and this shows where the Outreach Foundation is working in East and Southern Africa, two clusters of countries. In East Africa, that includes Ethiopia, South Sudan, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. And in Southern Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe. So these are the partners that we have, their logos here on the right side. After many years of civil war and fighting in Sudan, Sudan split into two countries, Sudan and South Sudan. Back in 2011, in July, South Sudan became independent. So this year they will celebrate 10 years of independence. And we have been in partnership with the Presbyterian Church of South Sudan since 2012 when they had their General Assembly. And we met with them and asked them how we could help, how we could work alongside them and help them. And they identified the four priorities that are there: trauma healing, educating young children and adult learning or literacy training, Bibles in their language, which is Nuer, and leadership training for pastors. So we started a project called Rebuilding Hope in South Sudan. You can see that there are refugees in the picture that have been fleeing from the violence in South Sudan. And nearly 500,000 of them came to refugee camps in Ethiopia, and another 120,000 went to camps in Kenya, and many more went to camps in Uganda. So about a third of the country fled or were displaced because of the war. One of the things we did was to establish a children's trauma healing training program. I've done some training in trauma healing, and we used a curriculum that was developed by the Bible societies and worked with children in the camps in Ethiopia to try and address some of the tragic memories that they had, the trauma that they carried with them as they were fleeing and as they arrived in refugee camps in Ethiopia. We were able to work, the picture at the top shows the lessons that we go through in the trauma healing program, helping to identify the trauma, the suffering, going through a grieving and a lamenting process, identifying that pain and bringing their trauma, their pain to the cross. And that's an exercise where they write down privately their pain, they bring it and burn it basically at the foot of the cross, a piece of paper with their pain on it. Then we go through a series of lessons on forgiveness and on rebuilding their lives. Let me see if I can go back one, just a moment. Interestingly, I found there are quite a number of South Sudanese that have made it to the States. The diaspora, as they're often called, are in Nebraska, in San Diego, in Tennessee, and you find these colonies of immigrants, refugees, if you will, including right here in Clarkston, Georgia, that cluster together. They form a community, and there is a Presbyterian church in Tennessee that we connected with, and some of their members got together and recorded the trauma healing lessons in Nuer, in their language. So we have that recording that we take and also do the training. These are some pictures from training that we did with adults who had been seriously traumatized in 2018 and 2019. And then these are pictures that were from also from 2019 of trainings that we did. Trainings that we did in Kenya with groups of pastors, with a seminary, and also with nurse midwifery school. So these folks, certainly the seminary students and the nurse midwives, will be going back into South Sudan with this training and will be able to help their colleagues. Education was another priority. Children had missed school. And so they wanted, I don't know if you can hear that or not. I'm getting some feedback.
No, I'm not here.
But children needed schooling, particularly young children, and adults wanted literacy training. So we have learning classes that were started for the adults in the camp. A third thing that they were interested in, a third priority, was Bibles in their language, Bibles and hymn books. And so we ordered over 7,000 Bibles in 2016 that were delivered in 2017. And we've ordered another 5,000 just last year to share with them. They're eager to have Bibles in their own language. Training young pastors and evangelists, leadership training. There are very few qualified or formally trained pastors to work with this mass of people. But it's interesting because the refugees have come eager to be involved in congregations. This is a story that I shared last year about a woman that I met in one of the camps in November of 2019. Her name is Hawida. She comes from a village that's just north of the border of South Sudan in an area called the Nuba Mountains. So she's not a Nuer, she's not from the same tribe, but she escaped her village, which was predominantly Muslim, including her family, and she walked about 1,200 miles from her village to the capital there in the south at Juba, and then on to the camp, Kakuma camp in Kenya, where I met her. She was 14 when she left, her family left home and started this trek. And it's about the same distance as Fayetteville to Canada. If you were to go from Fayetteville up I-95 all the way to the border with New Brunswick, that's about the same distance. Except in her case, it was much hotter than is usually with Canada. But she arrived not knowing anyone, not speaking the language, and was pregnant. She now has been in the camp. She has a daughter who is 5 years old, and she has joined the church and the seminary. She sings in the choir. She did the trauma healing training and is now able to work to help heal the pain of others in the camp. Another interesting story from that same camp was a widowed foster moms program. There's some 25,000 children that have come across as refugees, have crossed the border unaccompanied, separated from family, or orphaned, and have ended up in the camps. So they're registered by the UN, and they have been fostered now by the women in this church started a program. They were widows. Their husbands had been killed in the war, or they had been separated from family. And so the widows fostered the children, 8 to 10 children each, and the congregation comes around them and has helped to share their resources, their food rations, clothing, fees for books and materials. And a church here in Gainesville, Georgia, has helped with providing sewing machines and training these women to use that to earn some money to try and sustain that program. So this is just a slide that talks about the project, Rebuilding Hope in South Sudan, and my ministry, which is also supported from you all and from other churches and individuals. And this is just a slide that shows how to give. So let's see if I can stop this. Have you been able to hear what I've been saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear it perfectly now.
Just could not hear the video.
There's probably some magic to that we have failed to.
Now I can't hear you. Let me connect with a cable here. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're back.
We're back. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure if that was working. Did you see the video? Without, I mean, my annotation of the slides, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We saw that. Yeah.
Okay. I have another PowerPoint with just some photos. Let's see. And I can also annotate that. And then we can go to some questions. Let's see. Yeah, I was anxious to be able to provide an update on what's happened in the last year since I was with you all. And I recently did an update through the Outreach Foundation. It's available on the Outreach Foundation website. The link is there at the bottom. But if you were to go to the outreachfoundation.org and click on updates, I think it's probably the first or second one that's in that list of updates. And it can tell you a bit about what's happened in the last year, more specifically, while we've all been away, especially focused on the education work in South Sudan. So this is some of the work that's featured in that update. My counterpart there is a guy named John Jock. He's in the white shirt here in this picture with the teachers. And that's his bicycle over there. He works with teachers in each of the 6 camps in that area of Ethiopia, the South Sudanese refugees. And these teachers are given a very minimal stipend to work with these students who otherwise would have no opportunity for an education. The UN tries to provide primary and secondary schooling, but there are far too few schools for all the children that are there. So many of the children have no access to education. There are now 20 preschools and 42 of these classes of adult learners learning English and learning to read and write in their own language, Nuer. Many of them, most of them are women. Many of them are widows, and they have come without any kind of formal schooling or training. And this has given them the opportunity to learn to read. And they are some of the ones that we are targeting with the Bibles when we were able to distribute those Bibles. This is a little bit about the trauma healing program, just a couple of pictures. These are the nurse midwives from last year. They graduated in July of 2020. And they have their certificates from the training in trauma healing. So they have, they're equipped now with the basic counseling and trauma healing skills. And they have all been deployed now back into South Sudan, many of them. Some of them are still in the camps working, but many of them have gone back to their home villages or their areas. And with that knowledge about trauma healing and psychosocial support, they can be very helpful to people in their village. The girl on the right is taking her pain that she's identified to the cross. The cross is out of the picture, but she's putting it in that bowl there, and those will be burned as a symbol of a release at the foot of the cross. So she has shared her pain with Christ, and it's something between her and Christ that she has shared that pain. She has released it. These are the Bibles. The picture on the left is from Tuesday this week. I was informed, and they sent this picture of the Bibles being unloaded from a container. These Bibles are in the Nuer language. They're printed in South Korea. So we had to raise the funds from churches and individuals in the U.S., send the money to the Bible Society of South Korea that organized the printing of these Bibles. And then they were shipped from South Korea to Djibouti, and then put on a train to customs and on a truck to the warehouse there in Addis Ababa. So it's been a long process. It takes about 10 months from the start of paying for these Bibles to the arrival. And then we'll hopefully be distributing those when I go out there in June. I'll be able to help distribute some of these Bibles and capture some of the joy that people show in receiving a Bible in their language. And the guys on the right in the top picture are young Sudanese who are in pastoral training. And the picture in the bottom is the School of Theology in one of the camps. So we have Bible training and theological training at several of the camps, trying to train leaders to serve some of the 190 congregations that have started in these refugee camps. It's incredible the faith that these folks have, that they have brought with them across the border. Now, Mike said he was going to ask me about COVID and what the impact was from COVID on that part of the world and on refugee camps. We were all incredibly concerned a year ago when the news broke of this pandemic, because of the situation in those camps where clean water is scarce, there's overcrowding, there's very little access to formal health services, and we just knew that it would spread like wildfire. Well, fortunately, it hasn't spread like wildfire. There are cases of COVID in Africa, but not nearly as bad as there are here in the US. And they have gotten the message. Outreach was able to raise funds for COVID relief and sent money for education. The bottom left there is one of the pastors who's working with his community on sanitation and distancing and so forth. You can see a church service in the middle there, where they're segregated by 6 feet or so, and the container of clean water and hand sanitizer. So they have been instructed about social distancing, about wearing masks and hygiene. So there is good awareness now, I think, about the spread of this virus. They believed the message. They trusted the authorities from the UN and from the church who told them about COVID and the way it was transmitted. And they had heard similar messages, of course, before with HIV and Ebola and some of the other terrible diseases that have spread in various parts of Africa. So they were aware and believed the messages and took steps. Sometimes people ask me, what does it look like in a refugee camp? Because it's not easy to get access to these camps. There's a lot of pretty tight security for foreigners coming into the camps, as you can imagine, particularly now with COVID. So this is a very typical camp in that same region, in the Gambela region. I try and visit them every year when I go. Sometimes I can and sometimes not, but basically there's a progression from the top left picture when refugees first arrive and they're put in tents. Then they are given a plot, a small area where they can build their huts, and they're given a certain number of sticks and the plastic sheeting that they put on the roof, and they're responsible for everything else. They they collect mud and smear the walls of these huts, and then they collect thatch and put that on the roofs, and you'll see the finished product there. That's a refugee camp that's been there for several years, that looks more like a village scene from South Sudan, except that it's more densely populated. Water is either trucked in container trucks, or they drill a deep well, and the whole community comes during certain hours to collect their water. These are just some other pictures of collecting the material for either for cooking or for building their homes. And then the bottom left picture is a pretty densely populated displacement camp. And you can just imagine what would happen with transmission of COVID, for example, in such a dense population. But fortunately, that's not been a huge issue, at least not as of yet. People also ask, when will the refugees go back home? And typically, globally, a refugee will spend as much as 20 years in a refugee camp before they can safely return home, or before they have a place to go back to. In the case of the South Sudanese, some have gone back because there is a ceasefire at the moment, although there's still sporadic violence in parts of South Sudan. There was a ceasefire that was signed in September of last year, September of 2019. And in 2020, in February, a year ago, actually, there was movement towards a transitional government. And the international agencies and UN have been trying to get them to work towards reunification and building a new government. And that's moving very slowly. But some refugees have crossed back over into South Sudan, either by bus or by barge there. And often this is what they find. The pictures on the right are what's left of their home or their village. The bottom picture there on the right is a church that was destroyed in South Sudan during the war. So otherwise, they're just faces of folks that I've captured during my trips. There are some amazing people. They're incredibly resilient, and they are worshipful. They are full of joy. This gentleman in the bottom center is the Outreach Foundation helped him get his formal training as an obstetrician gynecologist. He had done his medical training in Khartoum before the 2013 war broke out in South Sudan. He's still single, and he completed his obstetrics training in November of last year. And we will help him find work either in South Sudan or in the camps for the moment. But he's a wonderful Presbyterian obstetrician gynecologist who is dedicated to helping his own people. And he's one of those that is desperately needed, as South Sudan has about the highest maternal mortality rate of any country in the world. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and go back and join you all, and be happy to answer any questions that you've got from what you've seen or heard.
Okay. Frank, we're going to just kind of do this as a round table and let people ask what they want. I'm going to ask you a question to start off, and then I'm going to invite others to join in as they will. This congregation's connection to African mission, at least since I've been here, and I think probably before, was largely through the 2-cent a meal offering that found its way from this church to the House of Moses Crisis Center in Lusaka. And I know that is part of a larger operation of crisis nurseries. And I know your wife as well has been intimately involved with that ministry. And could you just bring us up to date a little bit on that, since that's probably what we're most familiar with, and then we can sort of springboard off of that?
Right. Thanks, Mike. I've known of the House of Moses for a number of years, as we were next door in Malawi. And like you say, my wife helped to start Ministry of Hope, which is a similar program to the House of Moses for uh, infants and very young children who had been abandoned or completely orphaned shortly after birth. And the House of Moses is a similar kind of program, as you know, in Lusaka. We ended up spending a year in Lusaka, our last year on the field as a family. We were at Justo Mwali Seminary, which is right near House of Moses and Bill and Betty Bryant home. And we got to visit a number of times while we were there. It's Zambia is pretty progressive in terms of child protection and child rights and all the legislation around caring for young children. The conventional wisdom these days is that children need to be in families. And that's what UNICEF and all of the children's organizations are really trying to reunify or find placement for children so that they do not grow up their full life in an institution, but instead can be connected with a family either through foster care or adoption or what's called kinship care, trying to find extended family for these children so that they can be loved and cared for in a home setting. It's not always possible. There are kids that need alternative care options. There are children who may be physically or mentally disabled, or in some case cannot be fostered or adopted out. And so there is a growing role for special needs kinds of young children to be in a setting like House of Moses or Bill and Betty Bryant home. I'm pleased that at Bill and Betty Bryant home, there is a staff member who has done quite some training in this process of researching and connecting children with families. And the system of adoption and foster care is somewhat foreign to their culture. So there's a lot of educating that has to be done of the public, and some of that's done through churches, where she goes and visits a congregation, a Presbyterian or United Church congregation, and talks about the need for these children to have families. And so it's a matter of convincing people that it's okay to take a child who's not from your immediate family and give them the love and support that they need to grow up. And that's happening, I know, increasingly from Bill and Betty Bryant. A lot of the children from House of Moses sort of graduate to the Bill and Betty Bryant home because they age out, if you will, of the House of Moses, which is primarily for infants. So it's a good program, and it's making quite a difference in the lives of many children.
Good, great. And your wife's involved with helping to create similar, or has created similar programs.
We started in our home with taking in infants that had been abandoned, primarily during the peak of the HIV/AIDS situation. There were infants that were just left, including several of our children that we've adopted. We have 6 adopted children in our family, and several of them had been left abandoned because their mothers perhaps were HIV positive and felt that their children would be positive as well. And that's generally not the case. The children may test positive for antibodies, but will be negative. And so social welfare in Malawi asked us if we would help. And we started in our living room with 7 cribs, and that grew into a house that was supported by the church, by the Presbyterian Church of Central Africa. And so the Ministry of Hope was founded there, and it spread to Mzuzu in northern Malawi. So there are 2 of these homes in Malawi. And then when we went to Lesotho, we helped a public health nurse to start a similar program. And so all of those are still functioning.
Great, thank you. Folks, please feel free to chime in and ask questions about what you've heard or things you'd like to know about Frank and his ministry. That will be great.
I just wanted to know what more could we do? Where would our money be best utilized?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's a lot of need, as you can imagine, whether it's with vulnerable children and families and the process of reuniting children with family and making that happen in their best interest, or the work with refugees. And that's the work that I have been drawn to in recent years after doing this training in mental health and realizing that these folks have been traumatized from parents to child, and there is intergenerational trauma that occurs because of the situation in their home country. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have this Rebuilding Hope in South Sudan project through the Outreach Foundation, which is focused on those 4 priorities that I mentioned. And Mike has a copy of the video, by the way, so all of that information is there. He can make that known to you. The work with vulnerable children in Kenya, Rwanda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe is trying to help place children and help children to reach their potential, to be in a place that's safe, where they have access to quality education, to health care, to food security, so that they can grow and develop as they should. So many of our partner churches, the Presbyterian Church of East Africa in Kenya, the Presbyterian Church in Rwanda, the Presbyterian Church of Central Africa in Zambia, and the Uniting Presbyterian Church of Southern Africa and Zimbabwe and South Africa are all working with programs to help vulnerable children and families. So there are a number of different ways to help through the Outreach Foundation. We have a project as well for vulnerable children. And there are updates on many of these projects on the website.
Well, Frank, I'm assuming like a lot of projects for missions, there's probably a number. So if people wanted to, whether they're designating it for the project or for a particular missionary, there's a way to direct that.
Right. And for the Rebuilding Hope and for my personal support, it's the last slide of the video that you should have. And if you can access the outreachfoundation.org website, along the top screen there, the top menu bar, there'll be updates, there'll be projects. You can scroll down and look for Africa. You can look for a specific country or project, and there'll be a way to give to that project.
Okay, thank you.
In the old days, we used to have what were called ECO books. I don't know if you remember the ECO opportunities, extra commitment opportunities. That's gone now, both in the PCUSA and in Outreach and in most organizations. So it's all done online, but there are ways that you can connect and give through the church, through the presbytery, to any of these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I've talked, like I said, with Brittany about doing something. So I think we're going to try to maybe find one project that would be appealing to children and focus on that. So yeah, I'll look at all this on your website and maybe email you and talk to Brittany, and we'll come up with something that you maybe just an ongoing project that we could focus on.
That'd be great, Andrea. There's lots of opportunities. Education is key. It really is the way out of their situation, ultimately. And so many children are eager for the education, for the opportunity to learn and to grow and develop. And so I'm a real proponent of education as a way out of poverty and a way out of their situation. Their parents haven't had access to it. Often it goes back generations that they've not had access to quality education. And so it's an opportunity. I think it's a great investment from early childhood all the way through secondary school. So supporting teachers, providing materials, books, and even a classroom or a desk can make such a difference to kids.
Okay, that would be something we could do. Mm-hmm. Something cool. Okay.
I saw on the video that or the slideshow that you had they had sewing machines. They had the pedal sewing machines.
They do.
I have one of those. I'm just using it as a piece of furniture. How did you get one of those to them?
You know, it's interesting. I grew up, my mother and even my grandmother had the Singer, treadle sewing machines. And I was eager to find something that would operate without electricity, because so many of these places, they don't have reliable electricity. So those machines are pretty hardy. They're pretty simple. And they are available in places like Nairobi or in Addis or in the big cities in Africa. You can buy those machines there. And that's what I did with the widowed foster care mothers. We bought them in Nairobi and transferred them to the camp. And we had a woman in the camp who knew how to use them and could teach the other women. So this First Pres in Gainesville, Georgia, was eager to get involved in that project and raise money initially for 3 sewing machines. They're about $250 each. And then we bought material and all of the things that go with it. So it makes a huge difference because it enables them to make school uniforms for those kids. That was one of the first things. And then with extra material, they can make clothing for sale. And that's how they supplement that project.
We had that in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing they had all the women and they had their pedal sewing machines because electricity was not something that's that's good there.
Right.
I have an interesting story. My grandmother had one of those pedal sewing machines all her life, and then when she was older, my grandfather surprised her once with a new Singer electric sewing machine, and she was very proud of it. But she told me it didn't work as well, and the pedal one was in the garage, and she said anytime she was sewing, she would end up taking it out in the garage and using her old Singer pedal because she said it sewed straighter and it was more
So Frank, to do things like that, the better route is to give the money and let the purchases be made in Africa, as opposed to trying to ship a sewing machine across the ocean to Africa.
True. Even though you may have one in your basement or in your garage that you're not using, that you'd be glad to give, it's more problematic to try and get it there. And with so many things that we have surplus here, they break down. They can't be maintained. You can't find spare parts. So it's better to find what is available locally if possible. And these machines are.
I do think if people in our church knew, $250 could buy a sewing machine that would work great without electricity, I think that might be. Don't you, Deborah, think, if you can almost visualize what your money's going for, it's kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would like to kind of maybe pick out a couple of things, and then it would just be the money. And then obviously you could probably use the money for as needed, but it would make people give them a tangible image of what they could be using. I just think that is something we might work on. Mike, I had thought we might even have a catalog where people, $250 and have a picture of the sewing machine and a lady they're using it, or, $50 a school desk, that kind of thing.
Hey, you're reinventing the ECO book.
But it's a great idea, to break it down into bit pieces so that a Sunday school class or even a family or an individual can do something.
Wednesday together children, we could focus on raising money. I know I'm a teacher. Once I was in a school, it was after the earthquake, I believe, in Haiti, and their biggest need was water. And we knew if we could raise, I think, $1,500, they could have a well. I think that was what it was. It was many years ago. And so we had the picture of the well, and the people needed the water. And somehow that just really motivated the children to bring in their money. And we were so proud, when we reached our goal, and they thought about the children there getting clean water. So sometimes I think we have to have those pictures.
That's a great idea. And I know some churches have, a giving catalog or something like that at Christmas time, and where you've broken down needs into bit pieces like this. Bibles are $10, sewing machine $250, a desk maybe $20, that kind of thing. We could do that.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think, Andrea, anything that makes it personal and tactile and manageable helps.
Especially now during this COVID time where we're not able, to be together and talk about it and hear about it. This would be something we could send to people's homes. Anyway, I thought maybe our witness committee could try to do something like that.
Okay.
I haven't told Steve.
Put them in touch with me, and I can send them some pictures and details, and maybe somebody there can put it together. That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be willing to work on it.
Yeah, I'd be willing to help.
Yeah, actually, just in that presentation that you just gave, Frank, there's some really good pictures. The pictures of the Bible.
Right.
Pictures of
to me, a picture.
I used to be a regular, reasonably substantial giver to Outreach Foundation, and the Outreach Foundation seemed to turn into this professional fundraising machine, and they started mailing me CDs and doing all this kinds of things. And frankly, I just stopped giving because of that. But I would love to resume, but know that it's going somewhere. That's not buying somebody's lunch or their next airplane ticket. And so I think that it would be a great way to do that. I've been navigating the site based on your advice, Frank, and I found a button that says, it's really hard to get to, but it says South Sudan Appeal. Is that you?
It is. That was some time back. It was probably in 2017, in fact. Yeah.
You mean the South Sudan Appeal is the old?
The South Sudan Appeal is ongoing. It's we put that out there initially to try and raise some support to help with refugees. There's a lot of things, in thinking about some sort of a giving catalog or menu of ideas, farming tools, just garden tools, seeds, there's so many other things that could be added to that. And those could be a part of an appeal as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. I'd love to participate in something like that. So
yeah, I think it would be great. And then if you just have a lot of things for people to choose for, it's $20 here and $20 there. Before you know it, they've given $250 that they would not have normally given.
That's right.
I think it's great.
And so the folks in the mission committee know this, but we gave some money for Frank's direct support after the mission conference, trying to build some relationship with him as a missionary that we could work through, because that really is how it's done through outreach and that sort of thing. Is you can give to projects and you can give to missionaries, or you can give to both, so we tried to begin to make some investment in Frank as well as in the project, so that we would have someone we could do with what we're doing now, to have a direct connection to the ministry that's going on. And Frank, that leads me to a question I wanted to ask before the time got away from us, which is, what's next for you? This has been I'm sure a remarkable year in a lot of ways, but supposing that the world opens back up, and I know you've mentioned some of this, but what's next on your agenda? What happens in your ministry at this point?
Well, I'm eager to go back and to be with my friends, my partners in South Sudan and Ethiopia and Kenya, probably in June. Visit several projects that have stagnated. There's a church project in Nasser, South Sudan, that has stalled, and they want me to come and see how they can restart that. So I'd probably be gone for a month to 6 weeks in June, July. Then it takes me a while to recover from those trips, and I'm planning a Southern Africa trip in the fall, in October, November. That would be more focused on vulnerable children and families. Those are the issues there. So it's every year I try and make 3, sometimes 4 trips to work with partners and to help them promote the work that they're doing and encourage them in what they're doing. And thank you for mentioning my support. I not on salary as such, so it is, and I have a big family, but it is very helpful, very helpful to get support for my personal support. And that goes through the Outreach Foundation as well. So I do appreciate that. And there's information on that on the website as well. So I look to do this for another 3 years. And at that point, probably fully retire and find some place to put my feet up. But as I mentioned, we've got 8 children, 6 of them through adoption, and we have 7 grandchildren, and this year we'll have 9 grandchildren. Oh. So the family keeps growing, and I'm sure that within the next 3 years, my wife will be pushing me hard to spend time with all of those grandchildren.
Okay.
Well, and I just told my boss today that I was retiring next July.
Okay. Well, it has been a hard year for all of us. And I've thought about retirement multiple times during this year as we've been locked at home, more or less. And I'm getting tired of Zoom calls and Skype and WhatsApp and all of those means of communicating. And I miss the personal contact, mm-hmm. and look forward to being able to do that. I think that will reignite my energy and my enthusiasm for the work. And I'm really looking forward to that. So 3 more years of this. I grew up in Raleigh, by the way, so I know Fayetteville. I know North Carolina well. That's my home state, really. So my dad was a pastor in Raleigh, and so we may end up settling back in North Carolina.
Well, you couldn't make a better choice.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're at 6 o'clock, so I don't want to keep folks longer than they want to be kept, and don't want to keep Frank longer. So this is the last opportunity. This is the last call for questions before we break off for tonight. Anything else we need to cover tonight before we bid Frank farewell?
I don't think so.
Well, thank you, Frank. We do appreciate you and with the work that you're doing. And you've given us some good insight tonight. I'm sure Andrea and Deborah will hold the mission team's feet to the fire and find ways to help us as a congregation be a little bit more engaged in the broader African mission, which would be good because right now we're not doing 2 cents a meal.
Right.
because we haven't been in the sanctuary that much. So we need to rethink all of that. But do you want to close us out tonight with prayer, Frank? Would you like
I would love to do that.
All right.
And I'll do it in English if that's okay.
That would be good. Please, please.
Loving God, we thank you for this chance to at least come together virtually and discuss some of the needs and the mission of the church. We are so thankful for the faith and the resilience of folks in very difficult situations, whether they are refugees or displaced, whether they are children separated from family. Our hearts go out to them, and we pray that you would draw them close to you. We thank you for the folks at First Pres Fayetteville and ask that you continue to bless them and their ministries, both locally and globally. Lord, you know we have struggled to endure this time of pandemic, and we pray for the day that we may come together again personally and together celebrate and worship you. We thank you for this time again, and just ask that you bless each one this evening. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
And thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Blessings to you, all right? Have a good evening.
Thank you.